We've got some new information on a story that's been around for a while. It confirms the story. This is big. This is really big. Welcome to SkyWatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. We'll tell you what we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But first, we'll bring on the other guests on our panel this week. It is an honor to have them back here in the SkyWatch TV studio. First, the founder of Messiah of Israel Ministries, raised an Orthodox Jew in a family of rabbis going back generations. But Yeshua found him and wouldn't let him go. We welcome Rabbi Zev Porat back to SkyWatch TV.
Shalom, Derek. An honor to be here.
And with him, the longtime pastor of Hickory Hammock Baptist Church and the best-selling author of such books as Gods and Thrones, Gods of Ground Zero, and most recently, the book on which the two of them collaborated, The Rabbi, The Secret Message, and The Identity of Messiah. We welcome Pastor Carl Gallups back to SkyWatch TV. Carl,
Derek,
good to have you again.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks.
For people who may not be familiar with the Rabbi, who is the central character of this story, and this goes back to your first book about this, The Rabbi Who Found Messiah. Tell us the story. Who is the Rabbi, and why was this discovery so important?
Yeah, his name is Yitzhak Kaduri. The reason Zev co-authored this with me is because, as your audience will discover, he and his family are directly connected to Yitzhak Kaduri, that ministry, to the Israeli government in some ways. I mean, to this whole story. He's deeply immersed in this story, and we'll talk about that later. But this name, Yitzhak Kaduri, is known. You say that name in Israel, and everybody knows it. I use this illustration. It's like if you were to say, love him or don't, if you were to say the name Billy Graham in America among evangelicals. Everybody knows the name. Everybody knows the face. If you have his face on a book, everybody knows it. Yitzhak Kaduri is that to the Orthodox Jews in Israel and around the world that follow him, but especially in Israel. So he is was the most venerated, still is, but I mean he's passed now, but he was the most venerated rabbi in Israel's history. We can say in modern history, and that's correct. But many people, like Zev Porat himself, born and raised in Israel and in the Orthodox movement through all the rabbinical line, he says, and others that know this story say, no, in all of Israel's history, the most famous, venerated, exalted rabbi. Why? Because he kind of transcended all the denominations of Judaism. Judaism has denominations, just like Christianity. You know, Methodist, Lutheran, Pentecostal, Baptist. Okay, well, in Judaism, it's kind of the same. And every denomination has great similarities, but there are some differences too. But Rabbi Kaduri was like the go-to guy over all of them. The other head rabbis of all these denominations still is. His writings and his teachings that are written down, they still go to him. And he'll tell you, even in the public school system, he'll tell you about that. So this guy's huge. He was connected directly to Benjamin Netanyahu, to Ariel Sharon. He actually was instrumental. The mainstream media of Israel reported this heavily, that Kaduri was instrumental in getting Benjamin Netanyahu elected his very first time. Instrumental. If it wasn't for Kaduri, he would not have been elected.
Wow. So
it was huge. So this guy's not just some little obscure rabbi in the bowels of Jerusalem somewhere. When he died at 108 years old in 2006, there were over 300,000 people at his funeral. The streets of Jerusalem had to be closed. Ben Gurion Airport got jam-packed with airplanes flying in.
Well, what's the population of Jerusalem normally?
The population usually is 1.8 million.
So basically, you're saying another almost 20% of the almost 20% of the more people just came into Jerusalem for this.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Yeah. The president of Israel at the time, not the prime minister, but president, which is a big position, he gave the eulogy. Major rabbis from various denominations were there and or spoke at his funeral. This guy was huge. But the bottom line story is this. What most of the people at that funeral that day didn't know is that just a few weeks earlier in his own synagogue on Yom Kippur, October of 2005, he revealed, it had already been coming out in bits and pieces, but he stood that night, very significant night, Zev will speak to that. What he did in that synagogue was un-Jewish, but he did it anyway. But one of the things that he did, he said,
actually, it was very Jewish.
Well, yes, except for the preaching part and all that. And he shouldn't have done. You can explain all that. But the thing that was most significant, and what most of the funeral goers that day did not know, is that he had told his congregation, "I have met Messiah in a vision. I know who he is. I know the real Messiah. I know his name." And I know an identification marker to his return. Now, Kaduri did not even come close to setting dates, and we don't either. But he said there's a marker. And the Bible has markers, and the 70 weeks of Daniel, and after so many weeks, et cetera, the Messiah will, will come, et cetera. Same kinds of things. But he said at the death of Ariel Sharon, sometime after that Messiah will come, not before Sharon dies. Well, but the thing is, in January of 2006, Sharon has a massive stroke and goes into a coma that would last 8 years.
Right, he just went on forever.
He only came out of it in 2014, just a few years ago. So now we're on the other side, and that was the time marker that Kaduri said the Lord told him. But the other thing that he told, and that shocked the audience when he said that, because Sharon was still prime minister when he said it, and very healthy, but he had just given away the Gaza Strip, and people were mad, and rabbis were mad. Kaduri was not a part of the public outrage against him. Matter of fact, he actually spoke in favor of Sharon and actually acquiesced to the Gaza Strip deal. He said, that probably needed to be done, and we trust him, and he wasn't a part of the Kabbalistic curses that were placed on Sharon during that time. But when he says in his synagogue, after his death, he's speaking of the death of a prime minister, but sometime after that, Messiah is coming. Well, within a few weeks, Sharon was in hospital in an 8-year coma, and at that same hospital, in the same year, in the same month, Kaduri is admitted with pneumonia, and within a week or two later, he passes in that same month. So now here's the funeral. And so Kaduri told his congregation, I'm putting my revelation that I know about the Messiah's name in a note. It's going to be placed on my website 1 year after I've died. Now, the 1 year thing is explained in here from a Hebrew standpoint. People ask, why 1 year? It's all explained here. But in January 2007, the note was put on his website for the whole world to see. But it didn't say, name of Messiah is... Because with this revelation, if his ministry officials had seen that, it would have never made it to the website. Instead, it was written in a code, and it just basically described the office of Messiah. But there was a key to the code in the note for those who had eyes to see that said there's a way to decode this so that you know the name of Messiah. All that's in the book. His note is here. And so a few months, maybe a few weeks or months after it was on his website, screenshots were being taken. That's why I've got one on page 53 in this book, a screenshot of the note. It was decoded. And what it said was, and we can get into the guts of what it actually said, and and then how it was decoded. But what it said was, the name of Messiah is Yehoshua, Yeshua, and Jesus. And then his ministry officials, once they saw that, they took the note down. They actually took his real note. They took the note off the website. They had a story written about the note. On the front page for weeks, months.
They were boasting.
Yeah, boasting about it. This is his note. This is our beloved rabbi. The whole world was looking at it until it was decoded. And the second it was decoded, it disappeared from the website. The actual note that they had kept under lock and key, they were so proud of it. They took it, they destroyed it. I reveal this in the book. We know who did it, how they did it. I tell the story of how it was revealed to us, how all that happened. So much evidence, so much new stuff has come forward. So that's the basic nutshell. And it has rocked the world. It's rocked the Orthodox world. This message, it leads Orthodox Jews to the Word of God. This is not the Word of God, but it leads them to the Word of God, because as he will explain and confirm, the Orthodox Jewish person, or even secular Jewish person, if you try to talk to them about biblical matters, if you talk to them about Jesus in the New Testament, they won't even listen.
Sure.
But even if you talk to them about the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and you say, this is my interpretation, they say, well, I want to know what the rabbis say. And they don't read the scriptures. The man in the street doesn't really read the scriptures, They just, whatever the rabbis say is what I believe.
But they think they read the scriptures.
They think they do.
There are a lot of American Christians you can say the same thing about. So whatever the pastor or the priest says. Right.
They don't put it in context, and they might know a passage or two, and then they'll quote that. But as far as putting everything in context like we try to do here, they don't have a clue. So, but this leads them to it, because if you say, well, let me just ask you a question. Do you think, you want to know what the rabbis say? Do you think Yitzhak Kaduri is the greatest rabbi ever? Oh, yes. Whatever he says, he's right. Oh, yes. Well, let me show you the note he left. And then they go, where'd you get this? I've never seen this. Because, see, the deep state in Israel has covered it up. Truly, but this all exposes it all. And so, anyway, that's it in a nutshell. We could talk about it for hours, but you asked me to give the basic story. And in my first book that was published in 2013, I tell that whole story in a very journalistic, law enforcement kind of investigative standpoints. In this one, I retell it very quickly in a chapter or two, and then the rest of it is all the new stuff, including his input, the deep word studies, the understanding of the Hebrew mind, the Jewish mind, the new evidence, the new witnesses. It's astounding.
Yeah, and I want to back up a little bit to the funeral part. You mentioned 300 or 350,000 people at that funeral. Well, we need to understand, first of all, most of the people that came, or a lot of people that came, were coming from overseas. Rabbis from overseas, government officials. Actually, if they would have opened the streets for 1 million people, then 1 million would have came. They didn't allow people to come in. It wasn't that it was only 300,000. They said, okay, we don't have any more room. We don't have enough security to bring in more people. But if they would have opened it, you would have had 1 million people in that funeral. Yes. That's how, basically, besides the Arabs, everybody would have came.
Yeah. His funeral was actually reported in American major mainstream media the day that the funeral was going on. Number one, it was so big. Number two, so many dignitaries speaking. Number three, the man was so known among Orthodox Jews and even secular Jews, as I said. And you say, well, why would America do it? Well, because so many Jews living in America.
Right.
And so it was pertinent news information. I mean, the news of his funeral and his death really went global because of internet and then, of course, the connection of Jewish people that live around the world. So it was a big deal. And for him to have left that note, and we'll get into the beauty, the supernatural nature of all that. By the way, this book has all kind of supernatural backstories.
And you don't need to read the first book, because pretty much it sums up the first book and much, much more. So if people like to ask, do I need to get the first book? And the answer is no, because this tells what the first book does and much, much more. First book dealt a lot with history and his background. This book deals with the deepness and a new revelation, and answers objections and shows Bible verses and shows believers how to pray for Israel and how to witness to Jews, and answers a lot of objections. Very important. It
answers all the objections. See, when I wrote that first book in 2013, I knew the answers to the questions, but I didn't really write that first book dealing with all the objections. But between then and now, the Orthodox movement, Yad Lachim, which is an Orthodox anti-missionary group in Israel, basically focused on this story to protect, the Kaduri legacy. But when I wrote that first book, then all the interviews, I mean, you're talking about peer review. Here come the Jews. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. Yehoshua, that's not even Jesus. Yeshua, he didn't mean that. He was just talking about any old guy, And that was not even his handwriting. That wasn't even his note. It was a trick. The Christians did. They broke into our website, and they, all these things. Well, he just lost his mind in the last days. I mean, they've come up with all of these things, but every one of them are just so easily proven to be incorrect. And I don't trash anybody. I don't disparage, but I quote Orthodox Jewish rabbis who are out there attacking this story. And it's not disparaging. I just say, here's what they said. Now, let me show you what the scholars say. Let me show you what the evidence says. Let me show you, in one case, what Benjamin Netanyahu himself says. It's in here. Pat Boone is connected to this story. He's taken this right into Benjamin Netanyahu's office.
Wow.
And Benjamin Netanyahu has seen the note and said, he looked at the note and he says, Jesus.
And he did not deny.
And didn't deny.
The name.
Yeah. So, I mean, and all that's in the book. I mean, this is not my writing, not Zev's writing, this story. It's an amazing book. It's an amazing story.
It truly is.
Plus, pastors and teachers can just teach and preach out of it so much.
I want to go back.
There's an incredible thing that I'd like to get to, because we do need to take a break so we can tell you how to get a copy of the book, The Rabbi, The Secret Message, and The Identity of Messiah, and a brand new development just within the last few weeks that confirms inadvertently that the note was authentic, and we'll tell you exactly what happened and how it confirms the authenticity when SkyWatch TV continues after this. Welcome back to SkyWatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me, the co-authors of a new book, The Rabbi, The Secret Message and the Identity of Messiah, about Yitzhak Kaduri, the most beloved rabbi in Jewish history. Is that a fair statement?
In Jewish history and until today. If you go to public schools in Israel, all the documents, all the answers to pass the examination of a secular Bible class has to be what Kaduri says. So he's the top authority. So basically, if they want to debunk his revelation that Jesus is the Messiah, Yeshua is the Messiah, they have to take everything out of the public schools, everything out of the synagogues, because everything's Kaduri.
Yeah. As you mentioned, Carl, one of the defenses that the maybe not defenses, but one of the attacks, I guess, on the authenticity of the note was that it wasn't his handwriting, that it was forgery, that it
That's
was
what they were saying.
somebody made it up, somebody hacked the website and put it. But what is it, Zev, that's happened here just recently now, and this is being revealed for the first time, that has inadvertently confirmed what the claim you made in your original book and what you're making again in this book?
Now notice they didn't say, they weren't debunking the revelation, they were debunking that the note's not his. Only later they debunked the revelation. So first they're saying the note's not his. It was his until they decoded the note.
it, and then suddenly it was someone
not
else
his.
forged
Someone
it. It
else's,
wasn't.
it was hijacked.
Yeah.
Suddenly they were saying. Well, they were celebrating Rabbi, because I said Rabbi Yitzchak Kaduri is the most venerated rabbi in the history of Israel, and they were celebrating this feast of Purim, the story of Esther, celebrating that he is the one, actually, he's like Esther, or he's like the one who brings everything to Israel, and they were celebrating his ministry because they found his diary.
This current Purim, just recently.
This current Purim.
Okay, so here in
this
2019.
In 2019,
this
this
is a
is a
brand new revelation.
This is a brand new. If we would have known, we would have put it in the book. But again, this story just continues and continues and continues. And as we're talking, more things are happening. Well, they found this diary, and they decided in the celebrations of Purim, the story of Esther, to release the diary, and they wanted to prove that the diary is his handwriting. So what did they do? They brought the biggest or the most known handwriting expert in Israel, Eli Stern, who works with the Israeli military, who works with the Israeli police, who works with crimes in Israel, with everything. He's the top.
He's called as an expert in court cases.
He's called as an expert in court cases, absolutely. And he examined the diary, and he says there's no doubt about it. This diary was written by Rabbi Yitzchak Kaduri. I put my reputation on the line. That's what he says in those words.
Okay.
If you look at the diary, at the handwriting, and you look at the note on page 53
Because they posted it on the internet. They put his diary pages up there.
And we can show these on the screen
Yes.
because we've got these images here so that people can see them for themselves.
And you look at the diary, and you look at the note that he left that Yeshua is the Messiah, you can see the handwriting is the same.
The same.
Now, there may be a little bit differences, because remember, the diary is written when he's 50, 60 years old. The other note's written when he's 106, 105. So there is a little bit of a difference, but the name signature is the same, and an expert can see that it's the same handwriting.
Without intending to, the supporters, the followers, those who still trust and believe in Rabbi Kaduri as an expert, an authority on the Torah, saying, okay, look, we found his diary, we've released his diary, here's the handwriting to prove that it's his, we got a handwriting expert, and oops.
Oops. But they don't know the oops yet.
They don't know the oops.
We're talking
as we
about
record this, they are not yet aware of this.
They don't know the oops that they've done. Now they'll know when they see the show.
They don't know yet. This is the first time released on the internet. This is the first time we've revealed this information right here on SkyWatch.
So
TV.
this is a bombshell, really.
It's a bombshell. This goes all the way back, and this is in the book, when Israel Today first kind of reported this story in Israel and around the world. One of the things that Kaduri's son, David, who's now passed, bless his heart, and he was in his 80s at the time his dad passed, because his dad was 108.
And how did he pass away? He fell.
David, during one of the morning prayer, afternoon prayer.
He fell from the steps in the yeshiva. A lot of people say that he was taking a lot of pressure because of the note, and he didn't know how to handle all the media and everything, and really took it to heart, and that's why he fell from the steps. That's what they were saying.
But back to what I was saying, so here he is talking to Israel Today, and that's when they were just shocked and panicked by the interpretation, Yeshua. And so they were coming up with, well, somebody hacked our website. Well, how can that be? You wrote the story around it. It's there. Why would you write a story around a hack that you knew?
Right.
And they kept, everything they said kept falling apart. So then Israel Today reports, and it's in here, that the son brings out handwriting samples, and then he reveals that these were from when Kaduri was like 30, 40 years old. And then he brings this, see, it's clearly not the same. Well, clearly my handwriting sample when I was 30 is not the same as it is now.
Right.
So that kind of fell apart, but then they destroyed the original note so that it couldn't be examined. And I'm saying if that proves that it's a fake, why would you destroy it?
Just bring Eli Stern.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, the rabbinic movement, they know Eli Stern. They could have brought him.
Just a few weeks back, It is his handwriting.
Again, right there, page 53 of the book is right there
Yeah.
at the top of the page.
Yeah.
And just
So this is going to be huge. We're going to be writing and talking about this more and more. In fact, we might need to do another book because the story won't end. It won't die.
this is huge because, again, without meaning to, they have validated
Yes, they have.
the original note where he said that.
Yes.
And what exactly was the wording of that original note?
Well, first of all, you say it wasn't, or they didn't accidentally. It wasn't accidentally. God is the one who's ordaining
right,
this. God is the
absolutely.
one who's blinded them in order for this revelation to be revealed. Once again, proving the note is authentic. And it's huge. And once it breaks out, we're going to be using it in Israel as an evangelistic tool again to go to the people and say, okay, they've been saying the note's not real. Now we have evidence from your people, from the government. Look at the note. Look at the evidence. Look at Eli Stern's document.
Right.
And that'll bring in the revelation.
So
of
you're
Yeshua
basically
as well.
saying, do you trust Eli Stern? Yes. Do you trust Rabbi Kaduri? Yes. Put the two together. Now you need to trust Kaduri's note. That's right. And it says, Jesus is Messiah. Yeah.
This is really phenomenal. This is really phenomenal. I guess in our next program, what we should do then is talk more about how this book and your previous book have already been used and how you've been using it as a witnessing tool to Jews in Israel, and then how we
And
as
in
Christians...
the underground church in China.
The underground church in China, right. We'll talk about that as well, as your wife Lynn is
And what
connections
Kaduri
there.
did in 2005 when he spoke in a synagogue, what the implication of that is, historically, biblically, and even to the Jewish person that doesn't believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the one thing we need to remember as much as we love the land of Israel and the people of Israel. But we must never forget that everybody needs Jesus, and that includes
Amen.
our
Amen.
brothers and sisters in Israel. Well, this is a fascinating story, and we're going to talk more about it next week. You're the first ones to hear about this, about how the release of Yitzhak Kaduri, Rabbi Kaduri's diary, validates the note behind the story, the Rabbi, the secret message, and the identity of Messiah. And of course, there is only one name above all names, and that is Jesus.
Yeah.
It is an honor to have you gentlemen here with the Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat, Pastor Carl Gallups.
Thank you.
I'm Derek Gilbert. We thank you for watching as we keep watch. This is SkyWatch TV.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has died, aged 80.
We are with one of Rabbi Kaduri's disciples.
הצלחה רבה, והצלחה רבה ומהירה, בתוך ביאת משיח צדקנו בקרוב ממש, ואז ישפיע על כל כדור ואורץ. אנחנו להשם חרמה.